have to cry no more. And we won't have to cry no more.
All right, guys, welcome to Eat, Sleep, Train podcast. We're back after a little bit of a hiatus. The gyms have been back open. We've been flat out teaching Jiu-Jitsu and training and doing all those things. But we finally managed to get some time back in front of the computers together. And the first thing we want to do is just have a little bit of a catch up about what we've been up to in the three gyms over the break, over the time off from the podcast. Because although we're shut down for a big chunk, we're actually really busy. And then the topic that we're going to be chatting about today was a little bit more about the journey. We've discussed before white to blue belt, so we wanted to chat about what it means to be a purple belt. So before we do that, want to introduce Murray Ballin, who's the head coach at our Bentley location, and Lincoln Hancock, who's the head coach at our Thomastown location.
What's up, peeps?
So what's up, boys? What have we been up to over the last X amount of months whilst not podcasting?
You shoot, Link.
Well, you do say the gym's back open, but they were just closed for 5 days. So
yeah, we had a brief.
That's the nature of living in a pandemic in 2021 at present. But yeah, just I would say business as usual. I guess business is COVID usual or COVID normal, as I say. Gym's been flat out. A lot of training, getting ready for the upcoming competition season, which is always touch and go at the moment. We're not sure which comps will go ahead and won't go ahead, but we're training as if they're all going ahead nationally, not internationally. Unfortunately, we're not going to get overseas for anything, we don't think. But so team's training hard, putting a lot of work into the gyms. Got a new gym here at Thomastown that opened when we first came back from the pandemic.
Well, that's an important point too, because one of the things, the reason we didn't get some podcasts done towards the end there of the shutdown was because we're flat out building a new gym for Thomastown.
Yeah, went from 340 square meters to 704 square meters and 2 mats and all that kind of stuff, and some really nice facilities to reward the team, for all the hard work they're putting over the last five and a half years now we've been here. So yeah, that's been pretty awesome. Yeah.
Pretty significant upgrade too. Like previously we had one mat, we'd had one jiu-jitsu class a night, one Muay Thai class a night, some lunch classes and obviously kids classes going as well. But now we've got the 2 mats, 2 classes of each night. And it's already pumping. It's already insanely busy.
Yeah, we've got like 10 adult jiu-jitsu classes a week now, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 adult jiu-jitsu classes a week. We've got, 10 Muay Thai classes, 11 Muay Thai classes, and so many kids, I cannot keep up. A lot of kids classes. Actually, I was wrong. We've got 13 adult jiu-jitsu classes a week, and almost all of them are full.
Yeah, it's not a bad place to be. Muzz, what did you get up to?
Man, it's much of the same. I didn't double the size of our gym though, but we did. Yeah, we did actually add a mat up the front with the help of Fuji at the end of the last lockdown, which has been a godsend, and has very, very quickly become a favorite place of many of the members, particularly because there's the aircon out there. But yeah, it's been awesome, and it's really changed the vibe inside the gym because there's more room for people to just hang and do their drilling and extra training before and or workshopping after class. So that's a space that's had been missing and has filled a good hole. It's also allowed us to expand the timetable a bit and add some extra classes. So we've got some, and the membership has developed enough that we can start offering some advanced classes now, which is cool. And we have wrestling starting up in a few weeks on Saturday as well with the legend Costa. So that will be hard and good.
Yeah.
And good.
Yeah. Funny you should say that because I've really taken, I've always been interested in wrestling. I always trained a little bit and always sucked at it, but I've really taken to wrestling recently. I still suck at it, but I'm really enjoying being a beginner on the mat.
Yeah.
Training something that, even though it's a grappling art, it requires a bit of a different approach,
Mm-hmm.
different mindset, and a different training methodology. And I'm probably the least explosive bloke that ever existed. I mean, I couldn't even jump a fence until I was about 25, to be honest. I mean, that's why I gravitated to jiu-jitsu, I guess, because it requires the least attributes. But
I thought everyone in the northern suburbs could jump fences.
Firstly, I'm from the west, and secondly, you can always go under them and not over them. But I'm enjoying training something very, very different. It's a lot of fun, and we're about to start a kids wrestling program as well, which I'm excited
Oh,
for.
wow. Cool.
Which should be fun.
It's
other thing-
wrestling at headquarters 15 years ago or something.
Yeah.
So
The other, just to interrupt, Dave, before I forget, the other big event that happened at Bentley was obviously Jared, our Muay Thai coach, who started with us and helped develop the team from scratch, moved on to more corporate style work, using his degree, which is awesome. And so we've picked up, and you guys have in Abbotsford obviously picked up the same coach and Corey the Cowboy, and he's been awesome so far. Injected some great different energy and has created a good atmosphere already. So
Corey's a legend, man. He's super passionate. I think probably one of the most important things that you need in a coach for any of your classes is they need to be passionate. They need to be into it. You have all the skill in the world and be a really technical coach, but if you're not bringing any passion, any energy or vibes than that, the students are just not going to get into it, man. So Corey's fantastic.
That's a really good point. And I was speaking last week with Jake Matthews, UFC Jake Matthews, and he's quite good friends with Saeed, who's going to lead our kids wrestling program. And we had Saeed to take a adults class just to cover because our regular coach, Connor Evans, was away. And, Jake is like, how'd you find Saeed? And he mentioned how passionate Saeed is about coaching and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that's the main thing. They need to be passionate about coaching. They need to fit into the culture of the gym. And I need to feel like that they're just genuinely good people. And even if the coaching skill isn't quite there yet, we can work with that to bring it up. Now, that's not the case with Saeed. He has the coaching skill as well. But, that's like you're saying, Dave, that's the number one thing for me. If I feel like they fit in the space well and they contribute a positive energy and vibe to the team, then, the coaching can be worked on. But I've been watching, speaking of Corey, the Muay Thai guy, I've been watching his Instagram stories. And it looks like he's killing it. It's good.
Yeah, he's super passionate and he's still actively fighting as well. And he's just a good dude. But like you're saying, like cultural fit, it should go without saying, but I guess it doesn't. If you don't have that, then putting the wrong person anywhere in your gym can bring things undone. The right fit can send things in the other direction in a really positive way. But yeah, passion is super important. Then, like I said, like coaching is a skill. You can develop that. Obviously, we've had the headquarters for a long time, and we've had a number of coaches over the years that have come up through the ranks. And when they first start in the various programs, we have to teach them how to teach. And over time, they get better, just like they get better at jiu-jitsu. But yeah, adding those extra classes on, this is the other interesting thing I think that's happened is like for us is over the break with the shutdowns and then coming back, we used that break to try to build a new gym for Thomastown, added an extra mat for Bentley for the headquarters. We just moved into a massive new facility a couple months before we shut down, but we hadn't finished the renovation. So we've been slowly chipping away on that, working on the programs and the structure and all that sort of stuff. So we try to use the break at all this, at the spaces to figure out how to pop out the other side and really be delivering better classes, better structure, better coaching. And the students seem to be responding to it really well. It's flat out.
So I just happen to know that I've come with my MacBook not fully charged, and I did not bring my charger. And it's going down rapidly. So I currently have 39%. So maybe we should kick onto the subject. And if I just drop out, then you guys are just going to have to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Because it's down 6% since we started.
Right. So the topic for today is really talking about what it means to be a purple belt and the journey from blue to purple. We've talked about the journey from white to blue before. But there are a hell of a lot of blue belts out there in the jiu-jitsu world. And this is a space that a lot of jiu-jitsu guys kind of get lost in. Blue belt blues is really common. You know, people have a clear focus on getting the blue belt. They get it, and maybe things don't magically change the way that they expect to. Become this jiu-jitsu wizard. They realize it's still super, super hard, and that the grind still exists and all that sort of stuff. And sometimes they just get lost and fade out. So, but there's a lot of people who make it to blue belt, and maybe one of the problems that they're running into is having clarity around what it is that they should be trying to do, what they should be trying to develop, how they should be focusing their growth, their training, their improvement to get to purple belt.
I feel like just off the topic of jiu-jitsu for a moment as well. The jiu-jitsu scene in Australia has obviously developed a ton from when particularly you, Dave, and I came through. And there are a lot of people who are younger, and I feel like as a result have maybe less commitments and more time to give to something like jiu-jitsu, whereas others, let's say professional, whatever, are at the age where by the time they have put in their few years to get their blue, they're kind of developing other things as well. So they have more work commitments beginning, more family commitments beginning potentially, and just other interests that they're also developing. But it also speaks volumes about the importance of coming in to training and actually having a purpose for that training session or for that 4-week block or whatever that you are creating yourself, other than just following on with what your instructor is teaching in a class. That's my 2 cents to begin with.
I think so, but structure is always super important. We've talked a lot about that in previous podcasts about maximizing the time that you got on the mat.
Yeah.
And one of the problems that people run into in general is just not having any sort of structure that looks at short, medium, long-term goals. We talked a lot about, especially Link, about like the way that we approach competition and the different tiers of competition. Like this idea of breaking things down into small, medium, long-term, like your entry-level competitions, staging things basically. But then what's the actual technical goal? So because of the way that the sporting side of jiu-jitsu works, it does nudge you towards certain technical developments being more relevant at different stages. So for example, at international rules competitions, which is the vast majority of competitions that people engage at, particularly in the early stages of their jiu-jitsu for the first few belts, you're not allowed to do knee bars and toe holds until you're a brown belt and a black belt. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you shouldn't learn them early on, but it probably doesn't need to be a very heavy focus until later. It'd be more important to learn how to pass your more common guards than it would be to be trying to knee bar someone if you're a white belt.
Yep, that's a fair call.
I think Murray raises a good point here, sticking with the idea of the transition from blue to purple. And I think what Murray was trying to say with that, by the time the way I look at it, by the time someone's beginning to make that transition from blue to purple, they are taking responsibility for their own jiu-jitsu in a large way. And they are starting to develop and work on things that they want to work on, obviously with assistance from their coaches or whatnot. Whereas if you've got sort of the white belt or early blue, they come in, they're doing what's been spoon-fed to them, and they want a better phrase, no disrespect, it's the monkey see, monkey do kind of scenario. But generally, I guess for me, and I haven't graded many purple belts because my gym's new, but what I'm looking for when I start seeing that transition from blue to purple is the person starting to have a stronger conceptual understanding of jiu-jitsu and guide their own training in their game, and not necessarily just doing what the coach is telling them to do. Now, I don't want them not to do what the coach is telling them to do, but I want to see them taking some ownership of their jiu-jitsu, which you can't expect from most people at a lower rank because they just don't know enough. And if they were to do that, they end up doing all the crazy shit off YouTube and it'll be a mess. But I think that was kind of what Murray was getting at. And in my notes for this episode, a stronger conceptual understanding and some self-guidance, I think, separates a purple belt from a blue belt in terms of the mental space of their jiu-jitsu, rather than just the product that we see on the mat.
Well, an extension of what you're saying is, like, blue belt really is fundamentals. It has to be, and it should be. if you're not doing your fundamentals from white to blue, then everything that comes after that is potentially problematic, or you might have really big gaps in your game, or it might be built on some things that might work on more junior belts, but then later on down the track, it doesn't function anymore. So white to blue belt should be fundamentals. There's certain stuff that you need to know. You should know how to escape all the major positions. You should know how to pass the major guards. You should have a half guard. You should have a closed guard. You should have a collar and sleeve open guard. You should know how to play some mount, some side control. You should know how to transition between the positions, but you're not necessarily going to have the most amazing combination of open guards combining yet. So you might not be moving through from one. So like let's say a collar sleeve to a lasso to a deliver to whatever. That might not be happening yet. Your game might not look super personalized at blue belt. And because white to blue belt, you're actually trying to just build up the base knowledge. So your basic positions, your language, and learning how to move. It is, like I say, it's hard to be looking at things conceptually at that stage, because you just don't know enough. To be able to think about things conceptually, you have to actually have enough knowledge, enough technical understanding in enough areas to be able to see commonalities that are actually a concept. Oh, this thing over here is similar to this thing over here. Bang, I got a concept. So I agree 100% with you, Link. I reckon that if we're like really oversimplifying the summary from blue to purple, more conceptual understanding, but also the students should start to personalize their games more. So their guard is going to start to look more distinct. Their passing style is probably going to start to look more distinct as well. The reason I raise those two positions is because they're much more dynamic and there's much more variation in it. Mount is quite a little bit more kind of linear to the variety of the way that you can play the mount is more restricted than something as open-ended as a guard playing or passing game. So in those two areas, we should start to see a lot more individualism in their style of play. And they're going to need to drive their own training more, because it can't always be that what's being taught on the mat is going to be solving the most immediate problem for them. If you're a white belt, whatever's being taught in the fundamentals class is going to be relevant, because most of your jiu-jitsu is not very good. But by the time you're a solid blue, what's being taught in class is definitely going to be useful, but there's probably something else going on that needs to be addressed that's not being addressed right now. And it might be like, man, my side control escapes suck. But, you know, we're working some guard passing for the next 3 weeks or 4 weeks. So you might have your own other theme going on the side. And that's where that self-drive needs to come in, to manage your own training and looking at what the technical, the most pressing technical issues are.
I feel like what Link was saying before is it's not entirely what I was trying to say, but it's a really good addition to, and I 100% agree with it. And it's probably the most common conversation I have with the blue belts at Bentley in terms of them taking some ownership for their own development. But it's also just listening to you guys talk about it. It's also the conversation that I feel like they have come to me with. It's the most common conversation that they've actually opened with me, in terms of, saying that they've recognized these holes in their game and realized that they need to work on that personally to actually progress. So it's a good sign.
I think
about an area that's often so leg attacks are an area that's becoming more fashionable these days. And obviously at white belt, blue belt, purple belt, all you can do is a straight ankle lock. Unless you're wrestling in sub only, but you obviously don't want to leave the development of your more advanced leg attack games until later, because by the time you get there, if you start working it then, you're going to get smashed by anyone who's already been working it. So it's a no-brainer that starts to be developed earlier. And we have a focus in our gyms of that if you're not already starting to develop your leg attack game, not necessarily your rotational stuff, because that really comes down to whether or not you want to wrestle in sub only, although the recent rule change in IBJF in no-gi changes that a little bit. But our approach is that when you hit blue belt, you need to start developing a nuanced understanding of the leg attack game, if for no other reason than to not get caught. Now, Link, you've got out of the three of us, you've got the strongest leg attack game. What are your thoughts around the the best things to be focusing on, and when?
Look, it's individual, but I think definitely I want at blue belt at the latest, probably for the guys to start working, at least the knee bar toe hold style game in the gi, because like you say, you don't want them to get the brown belt or to get, before stripe purple, be 6 months out from brown belt and then start working the game, because that's way too late. And they will get torn up in that area for the first 6 months until they catch up, or however long it may take them to catch up. And same with the heel hook game. I think you want the heel hook game to start pretty early, somewhere around blue. I'm weary to a large degree of letting lower white belts play the reap and heel hook game, not because I don't trust the person applying the submission. It's that I don't trust the reaction of the person receiving the submission.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah,
Yep.
the UFC is so widespread now, and like they see people do these crazy rolls and spins out of heel hooks and stuff, which if you understand the game, you understand which way you can roll and can't roll. You understand, corkscrewing and clearing the knee line and all that kind of stuff. But if you don't, if you're just a newbie and someone grabs your heel, if you happen to turn the wrong way, or if they happen to chase it too hard, then you can have some trouble. So the other thing is, I guess, I do let the white belts play the heel hook game when I'm teaching it in the class, the upper white belts, and I do speak to them very sternly about, and we're kind of getting off topic here, but I'll just be brief, about rules of engagement, eye contact, don't actually turn it on, that kind of stuff. And then I never force the students to play on the mat. I always leave it between them and the partner to decide if they wish to play IBJJF rules or if they wish to play, I guess you could, for want of a better phrase, ADCC rules. But I think, it has to start pretty early. I mean, upper white belt, you want to have a really strong foot lock game, straight ankle lock game, because it's such a huge part of the game. And it is effective. I mean, we see it at black belt all the time.
Mm-hmm.
IBJJF straight ankle lock, black belt are carving people up. Maki Musameshi won the black belt world championship final with a straight ankle lock, fastest submission ever in the final. So you need to be on that early. But in terms of the rotationals, somewhere around blue belt, I would suggest. Off that topic, there's something else that I'd like to mention, but maybe if you guys want to continue on that.
No.
Come back to that before my battery. I guess this one I hear a lot, and it was one that actually applied to me, and I'll start with my story. So I remember being a 4-stripe blue belt and just I've pretty much beaten up most of the blue belts at the gym. No offense to anyone who was training with me then. And, winning a lot of competitions. I remember you saying, Dave, I remember this conversation quite clearly, and you'll probably remember it too. I was pretty aggressive and I was pretty rigid. And you said to me, you're not getting your purple belt till you soften up. And that made a big difference because, and I speak to my guys about this a lot, for someone to get their purple belt, I think they need to have flow. They need to be soft and have flow in their jiu-jitsu. And that's really important, I think, in the transitions. There's definitely a time to smash. There's a time to be heavy. There's a time to be rigid. Okay, and that's generally in pinning, often in some pinning positions, etc. But I think if you do not have the flow, if you're not smooth, where you will fail is in the transitions. Because in the transitions, you need to be able to adjust quickly and flow with the transition and predict where your partner's going and beat him to the next spot. And you can't do that if you're too rigid or if you're too tight or using too much tension. So definitely by purple belt, I want to see that gone. I don't want to see, any unnecessary use of strength or stiffness or isometric strength. So I guess the two sayings I give my guys is there's a time to smash and there's a time to flow, and they can happen in a split second. You've got to be able to differentiate both. Likewise, the only amount of strength I ever want them to use is enough to get the job done and never any more. Use any more than what you need at that moment to get the job done, you're going to get tired real quick, or you're going to end up stiff. And then when that transition comes, you're not going to be able to react quickly enough. So I think from blue to purple, you've got to try to soften your game a bit.
That sounds like use all the strength all the time. No.
You dropped out. There. I'm pretty sure I was saying the opposite of that.
No, I know you were totally. I was having to dig at myself there. Just to
Hey,
add,
look, it's time to use the strength, though, as we know.
yeah.
There's times for everything. Yeah.
That's like Lee Ting that we've spoken to. We all know very well. He often has joked with me about being very strong, and then he's like, "You know what? And he's right. There's not a black belt I've come across who doesn't feel strong. It's not what you lift; it's how you use it. You know. And by that stage, everyone's doing it well. But before, I just want to get John Will. I remember he's the only one who's kind of given me an idea of what I feel like him and Big Dave in terms of what a purple belt should have. So adding to your experience and your kind of journey from blue to purple, mine was characterized by two thought processes. One, the biggest developmental change from a blue belt to a purple was theoretically that the purple belt had a game they were known for. Like, if you wrestle with Dave, you got to look out for his triangles. If he's, and that a purple belt should be able to give a higher colored belt a run for their money in that game, in at least that section of their game type of thing. And also, as a general rule, they were thought of as dangerous, as in, like, if you were a higher level belt and you were at all napping that day, they should be able to give you a real run for your money, if not catch you. And so I focused on trying to be dangerous and attacking, which really I think shaped me as a purple belt then, but something I really tried to avoid and go against, which probably didn't work, I don't know, but was to not be known for a particular, but to try and just be very offensive. And so my game became defined by offense is the best defense. I think one of his sayings as well.
I think that's a really good point that I meant to bring up at the start, and that I guess you guys would all agree with this. Like white belts beginner, blue belts like fundamentals. To me, purple belts like they're pretty fucking good now. That's like a serious belt. It's like the first real serious belt. And on their day, the purple belts should be giving the black belts plenty of trouble. And I don't think it's, if you get like a high level competitive purple belt, they're probably going to tap most sort of hobbyist black belts, if they're of similar weight. And that's kind of how it should be. I mean, that's a real, I guess you're beyond the fundamentals when you get your purple belt. You're on your way to mastery, for want of a better term, even though, mastery doesn't really exist. But, that's a serious belt. When I first started, Dave was a purple belt. Purple belt. You were a purple belt, Murray, I'm pretty sure. I think I was there when you got your brown belt. I can't quite remember. But, I mean, maybe not there on the day, but I was around. And purple belts were elite. And I guess a lot of people do jiu-jitsu, but a hell of a lot of people don't do jiu-jitsu. And if you want to compare purple belt to the rest of the general population, purple belt's elite, They're going to, on the ground, they're going to smash all the average mows out there.
Everything that you guys have said spot on. And I think, Murray, what you were talking about with John Will, really that you should be able to look at a purple belt and tell exactly what their game is. That's what we were talking about before, where your training becomes personalized. You should know when someone's passing. You can see their passing style and their playing guard style particularly. You'll be able to tell even more stylistically, like overall, like whether they're more of a pressure player or they like to move more dynamically. They should be able to understand how to do both. But people will have a preference for one or the other, and it might be to do with body types. Sometimes it's just personality. But I spot on 100%. If you look at any of the top level, like top elite level purple belts, from any of the major gyms that are going in there and winning the big comps, they will be handling most black belts that they roll with who are recreational. Just because at purple belt your game is so developed, your offensive game is really developed, and you understand it. And if you're getting someone caught into that, if you're funneling them into their fight, particularly, brown or black belt, and they're not having a great day, and you funnel them into that fight, those brown and black belts should be getting caught. So I talk about Mikey all the time in reference to his DASs. He's got a phenomenal DAS. He's a purple belt, trains predominantly no gi, but his DAS is black belt level, and he catches brown and black belts with DAS all the time. If I said to Mikey, hey man, you're not allowed to use your DAS, he looks like a purple belt. But you catch it like some brown and black belts that aren't familiar with him, that drop in and train or whatever it might be, they'll get DASed a couple of times. And you'll be looking at that wrestler going, man, like what's going on with the levels? It's like, well, he's got a black belt level DAS. That's his game. And I think that's one of the things that should be occurring when you're at purple. There should be a very, very clear A game that you have, and it should be sharp.
Yeah, I remember Big Dave saying much the same thing about your triangle when you got your purple belt, but black belt level triangle. It
should be that way. I think that maybe it's not black belt level from the day that you get your purple, but it's very highly developed and it's on its way. You obviously can't be a black belt level with all your stuff at purple, because then you would be a black belt.
Exactly.
It's within reason. But yeah, I agree 100% with you guys. That's one of the big hallmarks. Is like, if you're like, we all roll with our students every day, not necessarily every class, because we're teaching 4 classes a day, but we roll every day, and there's some days when I'm rolling with some of the purples and even some of the high level blues, and I'm like, they're giving me a run because they're on it that day, and I'm a bit off it, or whatever combination of things is going on. But they should be dangerous. They should absolutely be dangerous when they're senior blues purple belts.
And I guess a purple belt also should not be making those really silly errors that you see from time to time from a blue belt, which is fine. We all make errors. We all do that thing where we go in our head for a second, go, shit, what did I do that for? Now I have to dig myself out of this hole. But, blue belts, you can be having a fairly competitive role with a good blue belt, and then they'll just do something that drops themselves right in the shit.
Yeah.
I guess purple belt, that should become much less often. And also the gap between their best day and their worst day should start to lessen as well.
I think this is a really important point that you raised, Link. The gap between the best day and the worst day. Like, speak a bit more about that.
Well, I guess you expect a little bit more inconsistency of performance out of a white and a blue belt because they've got less training hours. They've built up less in those intrinsic elements of jiu-jitsu, touch, feel, and coordination, and strategy and stuff. But by the time they get to purple, that gap should be fairly closed. And I guess what I want to see from a purple belt is on their worst day, they still should be able to hold their own. Yeah, they shouldn't get blown out of the water on their worst day. Now, they may not be world beaters on their worst day, but I don't want to see the drop between their best performance and their worst performance to be too far. And that's really, that's something you can't teach, I don't think. I think that's only time on the mat. And encouraging them to be diligent and mindful with their training and with their rolling too. I mean, everyone knows I'm just going to use a jiu-jitsu term, and I don't mean it in any offensive way, the spazzy blue belt, it's a bit of a cliche. There shouldn't be any spazzy purple belts. That should be gone out of their game by that point. And often it's that, spazziness that gets you in trouble in terms of creating openings and holes for more experienced practitioners. But yeah, I guess we just want to see the gap between the best and the worst to be a lot smaller. It'll always be there. It's there for all of us. We all have those days we get in the mat at black belt when we're like, gee, everything's a little bit hard today, but we can still impose our game. Yeah, we might not finish everyone. We might make a mistake here or there, but we're not going to fall to bits on a bad day. And you want to see that from a purple belt as well.
I think also the other thing is like what it looks like from the outside, because we'll as black belts have been training a long time, we'll have days where like, God damn it, I wrestled like a piece of shit. I can't believe I'm bad at jiu-jitsu after 20 years. But what it looks like from the guys on the outside is like Link's still smashing it. or like Muzza's still crushing people, or Dave's still trying it, or whatever it might be. It still looks like we're winning, or we're not getting beat, but we can feel.
Yeah, you can feel you can feel a significant difference.
But for the more junior belts, that being off is a lot more obvious from the outside. It's much more visually obvious. But yeah, I think one of the other reasons why the gap between the best and the worst days lessens and should be a lot less at purple belt than a white belt and a blue belt is also just knowledge. There's still knowledge gaps at white belt, and even still at blue belt, like we're talking about, you can't be amazing at everything straight away because there's too much knowledge to have to actually gather in jiu-jitsu. There's too much stuff you have to get good at, and you have to.
I'd agree with that, but I'd also say, like Link spoke about time in. I think by the time you've had enough experience to get your purple, you've had enough challenging roles, you've had enough tired days, you've had enough days where, or sessions where your tank is empty and you have to be maybe a bit more patient, a bit more strategic, and take what you get rather than taking what you want, and just time in with those experiences and dealing with how you deal and you talk to yourself, etc., in those fatigued moments. I don't think blue belts necessarily have the same level of experience.
Yeah.
And on that, and something we touched on earlier, and maybe we're not putting this forth as linear as we could, because we do zero preparation pretty much when it comes to podcasting. Which might be some of the beauty of it, right? You don't want to. It's not an educational lecture, right? It's a long form discussion. That's what a podcast is. Should be still educational. They're, when we talk about their distinct games, they're much better at funneling to their games. So even when they get themselves in trouble, they can funnel it back to somewhere that they're familiar with and that they're good at.
Yeah.
And take themselves out of the trouble and back into a game where they can at least match whoever they're rolling with. You see that a lot, to be honest, at blue. Those good blue belts will be able to do that often. But I think you definitely want to see it at purple, that they can funnel the game back to that place where Murray was saying, or maybe it was Dave, where they're so strong that they can put almost anyone in danger. They should have that skill to get back to that place.
Part of it is the experience with enough rolls, like both you guys have been saying, the time, the hours on the mat, that you recognize when you need to rope-a-dope, like when you need to go with it'd be like getting caught in a rip and trying to swim against the current. Like, you've got to know when to basically kind of tuck in the defenses, weather the storm a little bit, and when the timing is for you to start getting back into the fight, how to be calm under pressure, all those sorts of things. And you can't develop that sense without having hours on the mat, without being beat by good guys when you're a good guy as well, like when you have good skill. Because there's a very big difference between rolling with someone who's good when you're not very good and not very experienced and not very technical, versus rolling with someone who's very good when you are good. The combination of those two things make a very different outcome. And you have to have experience being someone who is quite competent, quite good, rolling with someone else who is very good as well and puts you in trouble, and understanding how those things combine and where the fights are. But that's developing the mental side of the, I want to say training, but the role itself, understanding that, how to stay in the right headspace. I think that's something that develops over time as well, as you start to get more confidence in your offense and your defense. You should start to see that come into shape a little bit more, is how these guys respond to being under the pump. Like, someone's just absolutely just hitting them with like just pressure and like pass, like you turn a turtle, they try to take you back and they've got a collar, but they don't have the hook. And the ability to stay calm in those fights and work your way through rather than just panicking and giving up more. That you should start to see more of that at purple belt as well. I'm not necessarily going to see that at white belt and blue belt. You're going to be able to be panicked at those belts.
I think the time, we said a lot of things about time on the mat and stuff. And I guess for me, another indication of of this, what a purple belt means is often how quick you see someone go from purple to black. It's often not that long. By the time they get to purple belt, even the IBJJF minimum requirements is only 2.5 years from purple to black. So it's not that common to see someone get their purple belt. So the photo popped up today, actually. 5 years ago, I was a 2-stripe purple.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm, what are we in? Feb. In December, I get my first degree. Well, I hope I get my first degree. In December, I'm due for my first degree on my black belt, and I guess you've built such confidence. Well, not built such confidence, but you've got such a training base and the fundamentals are there that you can progress quite quick. Because definitely 100%, if I was to go back now and roll myself 5 years ago, I'll tear into pieces very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So, you do often see, not everyone, and it depends on, life and age and body, how good your body is and how many hours you're putting in the mat. But, I guess for those more, those who train more often, that, they can go from purple to black in, 3-4 years pretty quickly, like it's not that long. It might take them the same amount of time to go from white to purple as it does to go from purple to black, or more to go from white to purple and purple to black.
Yeah. Yeah, quite often it does. But there's a critical mass in knowledge too, right? Some people, it's just a real grind. It was, for me, very much like that. It took a really, really long time to wrap my head around enough of the basic skills, knowledge, concepts to actually start to get some momentum going. I felt like it was really slow going for the first half of the journey. And then from then it started to pick up quite a bit. And you see that with some of the guys, like it takes you a fair bit of time to get them through to blue and maybe even purple. But then after that, things start to come really quick. For others, the journey's more consistent. Let's 2 years between each belt, for example. But yeah, it's nothing can replace time on the mat. It might vary from one student to another because the quality of the time on the mat matters, how you apply yourself, and then you've got just natural physical attributes. Some people just come, they just come onto the mat physical beasts, whether it's from previous training in something similar, whether let's say freestyle or judo or whatever, or they're just born with physical attributes and they can just move.
Some people maybe a little more resilient than others, and they may not be doing much different, but they're just maybe a little less injury prone.
Well, this is an interesting one to raise. Something that you touched on before, Lincoln, I was going to mention it, which was that we talked about how at purple belt, one of the things we want to see is people being dangerous. And I think you mentioned it as well, Muzz, as well. There's a danger to it. They should be developing their offensive game. If you get someone in that fight, they should be dangerous against any belt in the gym, blah, blah. But one of the things that this requires is, this is a personality thing. It's characterological. Like some people are naturally just very passive and other people are naturally very aggressive. And we've talked about this as coaches before. I would much rather get a bunch full of aggressive guys and have to wind them back than try to get guys who are very passive and try to get them to open up their games and go for stuff, because one's much easier to do than the others. So if you get someone who's very passive, then getting them through to purple can take a long time because we're actually asking them to change something that's quite fundamental to their personality.
Yeah, I've had discussions with and even white belts, and often females as well, are a little bit less. They aren't as naturally aggressive as men, and it's something that. But I think terminology can be used to alter the way that they approach it. So you don't necessarily. It makes sense to us, right, to call it aggressive and to say you need to be more aggressive. But for the person who isn't necessarily aggressive on the mat, telling them or suggesting for them to be more aggressive just doesn't. You can see it doesn't commute. It doesn't make sense to them.
No, it's about being proactive rather than aggressive.
Yeah. And so that's how I try and sell the idea to them, is that they don't necessarily need to be aggressive. They just need to be active and proactive, like in a forward progressive way, in a forward and progressive way.
Well, it's I've said this a bunch of times to my students. I'm sure I've said it on the podcast before. It doesn't matter how good your jiu-jitsu is if you don't actually do it. So I could have black belt level triangle, but if I'm rolling with you guys and I never try to triangle you, I'm never going to triangle you. You
definitely try.
Yeah, I try. But it's the same thing. Like when Link and I are training, and the timer's running down. Like Link looks at the clock and there's 20 seconds. Then he looks at my foot and he's like, "All right, what's the quickest way I can get a sub? I'll foot like this skinny little bastard," and goes for it. Right? It's like, but without actually trying to go for the attacks, you're not going to get there. And that can be one of the most difficult things for students to actually make an adjustment in, is if you're naturally quite passive for whatever reason, opening up your game and starting to become more assertive on the mat and developing that attacking, that proactivity can be quite difficult. That can be the hardest thing.
It's just thinking. It's just thinking, like you said before, it's thinking about doing your jiu-jitsu so that you actually progress. That's all you need to think about it in terms of, rather than trying to be aggressive towards someone. But I just wanted to say briefly, thought of it while you were talking about some things before in terms of blue belts feeling like potentially they're stuck and just not progressing, making the jump to purple. Something that I'm trying to build the culture of now. I know we did a lot, Dave, when we were coming through, up through the ranks, and particularly after Saturday classes and things like that. But there was always a culture of, and it was just a culture that I was kind of brought into. It was always a culture of troubleshooting what was going wrong in your game with maybe a particular training partner or whoever else would work with you on the mat that day. But sometimes it helped having the same person each time who just maybe had a similar mindset, or you wrestled with a lot so that they understood what you were trying to do, how you felt, things like that. And drilling situations and or ideas that you have and getting feedback from your partner until you both walk away going, yeah, that was a really big improvement. But I don't like doing that in class unless you are exceptional. There is no space for it. Or unless you are such a high level belt that you can walk in and almost all of your roles are that live kind of process where you can kind of troubleshoot stuff. But I don't feel like there is enough ownership taken at the moment with just in general, particularly at that level, the blue to purple, the understanding that process will help them immensely. Like it's a huge missing part of a lot of people's training, I feel like.
I think you raise another good point there, Murray, and that is that coaches need to create an environment where there is a bit of space for people when they're approaching that level or when they're at that level. They need to be able to do these things. So I guess that's something we need to be aware of, something I'm certainly aware of with my guys who are knocking on the door of purple or purple is creating the space where they can work some of their own things. Obviously, while I'm still guiding and supervising to make sure they're not spending time, wasting time on I guess, areas of inquiry that won't lead them very far. But, they need a bit of space to do that. And I think, I know for me anyway, that's why I like having an advanced class where the training style can be slightly different to a fundamentals class, because I don't want the white belts doing that, because that would generally lead, or could potentially, I mean, some white belts are very smart, okay, and they can do that, but could potentially lead to them wasting a bit of time and having to reprogram a few things, bad habits that they pick up. But definitely we need to, as coaches, create the space for that. It's also why I have an open mat, though not many of the high ranks come to my open mat, it's mainly white belts.
I think we have a pro class at the headquarters, which is very, very self-driven, in that space, which is funnily enough, basically, generally speaking, for competitive blue belts and above, or non-competitors, purple belts and above. But that class is very self-driven. There's a topic, an area, or a theme that we're working with. The actual what you're drilling and what you're workshopping is up to you. And then you've got the coaches there and the high level guys to help you workshop it and figure out what needs to be fixed. But I agree 100%. There needs to be space for that, because the journey just at particular purple belt starts to become very personalized, and you need to maximize the opportunity for the students to get as good as they can, as fast as they possibly can. What a white belt who's been training for 3 months needs is very, very different in the structure to what a purple. It's the same as school, right? Like as you move your way through high school, you get to choose more and more of the subjects that you want to do. You get more and more electives. And then by the time you get to university, you're choosing your whole, and then if you decide to do your PhD, you're writing a thesis on what you like. Everything is about what you are actually deciding to do. It becomes, as you get further in the journey. That being said, there's a caveat with this though, that at the start, you are actually given some structure around developing all the fundamentals. Because obviously we get color belts that come and join the gym from interstate or whatever it might be. And they might move and roll really well, but there's some problems with their fundamentals because that was just lost in the mix for them. So sometimes we get like senior blue belts who one of the things that they need to go to do to make it through to purple belt is actually readdress some of their fundamentals. And that's just the process, is making sure that all that base level stuff is there.
Yeah, I often give, sorry, Link, super quick example, a guy called, and I'm sure he won't, if he listens to this randomly, won't be too upset that I brought him up by name. A guy we used to train with called Dan Anaskades, who was a very dangerous purple belt, and like from a mentality perspective, just brutal in that he was unforgiving and regardless of how tired he was, he always had more in the tank. Had an incredibly specific game that was driven around the twister, and to the point where he twisted a black belt in an ADCC competition mid-air during a takedown. But then as soon as it hit the ground, he got flogged. And once he started hitting more competitive purple belts in the Pan Packs and things like that, I think his competitive experience, and maybe that shaped his jiu-jitsu experience, because I'm not sure he's necessarily in the game anymore, sort of fell apart. And I remember he would come and do the fundamentals class with me. I was a brown belt at the time. He'd come and do the fundamentals class with me sometimes that you would take. So I would, as a brown belt, I would still go and be a student in those classes. And he would come in and just be like, mount control drill. How do I go from mount to, as an example? And he would laugh about it, saying his fundamentals sucked. But it took until he had all the things of a purple belt, could flow, competitive, aggressive, had a game that was dangerous to all levels when he was on his game, but start putting him with people who were good all round, and it started to show. He started to get pulled apart a bit. So that fundamentals bit is super important to not leave behind, obviously. I
think that raises a really good point that most coaches are going to experience at one point or another, or often, and that is that since we're talking about purple belts, for example, maybe someone joins the gym who's moved or whatnot, and their journey has been different, and maybe they don't meet some of this criteria that we consider a prerequisite for purple belt. And then, so how do you deal with that? And that's not, sometimes it's easy, depending on the individual and when they join and stuff and their life circumstances. And sometimes it's not easy. I guess for me, my perspective is, firstly, if a legitimate black belt gave them their purple belt, then that's their purple belt. And if I feel like they're not at that level, then it's my job as a coach to bring them to that level as quickly as possible. Yeah. And the other thing, when someone joins the gym and they're ranked from another gym, and perhaps I feel they don't meet yet the minimum requirements that at dominance we expect from that rank, I think there's an obligation on my behalf to have their back 100%, because if they come to me and say, I want you to be my coach, more or less they're putting their trust in me. And so 100% I'm going to work my ass off for them to bring them up to that belt. I've never demoted anyone. I've never had anyone ask. I don't think I would ever. It's very hard to see the circumstances where I would approach for a demotion, but perhaps if they were really struggling and they maybe said to me, hey, I think I would do better if I took this burden off for a little while, then that might be a different story. But generally speaking, if theoretically speaking, they weren't at the level that we expect, then you know that's one of the jobs and tasks that we take on as coaches to you know, help these people get to that level and get there as quickly as possible. And generally, it's fairly quick because, you know, they should have a fair few training years behind them. So.
It's an interesting topic. Sorry, Mars. It's an interesting topic that you raise because inevitably you get people that join the gym who already have existing experience and belts, blue belts, purple belts, whatever. And some of them may not be at the standard and have the base level of knowledge or skill that we expect of our belts. And the first thing, I think one of the most important things to say on this firstly is that there's always going to be some people out there in the jiu-jitsu world that get given belts that they probably aren't ready for. And that's not their fault. Generally speaking, people don't grade themselves. It's the responsibility of the coaches, and it's the, for lack of a better phrase, it's the fault of the coach for grading someone too early, if that's actually what's going on. It's the responsibility of the coaches to make sure that that the students are at the standard that they should be for any given belt. Now, jiu-jitsu doesn't have a formalized curriculum or grading structure. The requirements for each belt is quite nebulous. It's quite vague. There's subjective. Like you know when you can see one like that. Yeah, this guy's at this. But like most people that are experienced know roughly what it looks like, but it's very hard to identify really specifically. Like you couldn't list a set of techniques very easily for each belt that would be universal. That would be very difficult. But you also know when you see someone who shouldn't be in a belt that they're wearing, and it's not their fault because they haven't graded themselves. But
I just have one thing to add to that, because whilst it may not be their fault, we also, I think in some circumstances, there are extenuating circumstances that may lead, and I sent you guys an example via message the other day of, you know, someone might get a belt who may, from a typical standard of what color belt that is, they aren't at that level, but we don't know what their background story is or what that person's bringing to the table and why their coach deemed they were worthy of that belt. So there may be reasons why they are actually worthy of it that are different from character plus athleticism and jiu-jitsu skill. Having said that though, I think a real sign for me of character and great humility is when, and I've had quite a few students do this and colored belts who have entered the gym and they've gone, I want to be, you know, like they're clearly blue belt standard. But they say, can you give me your blue belt syllabus? Because I want to represent, I want to know I want to be able to do the blue belt syllabus to your standard as well, which I take my hat off to. That's a great attitude. And also those who have actually asked to go down in grade, whether it be stripes or otherwise. And I've never taken it. I've just said to them, you keep what you've been given, just do the work with me to get you. If you've recognized the standard difference, do the work with me to build your standard to where we're both happy. You know, that's, and that's also, I feel like you should, if you leave a school and walk into another school and the difference is that significant that you're like, wow. And it may, you know, it may just be a stylistic thing. It may not be that you're actually terrible at jiu-jitsu. You may just do non-exciting Muzz jiu-jitsu and then walk into immersion where everyone's upside down doing a 3/4 backflip into an omoplata, and you're like, what just happened there? And mate, just if the teething period's been and done and you still haven't found your way, then take some ownership and talk to your coach about it.
I think it's an important point you raised there, where stylistically you can get some. Every gym has its own little flavor, and sometimes you get a style that's like the kryptonite for your style. So it might be that, like, let's say that you're in a state or overseas and you're visiting a gym, and I ran into this when I first started training at Drysdale's in the US, and I was doing no-gi classes, and I trained a fair bit in no-gi back then as well, but like darces and head arm triangles, anacondas, all that sort of stuff was totally new. We're going back a decade now. And I got mauled by everyone that was there. There's a few key guys and they just monstered me for 3 or 4 days with them because I didn't know what the hell was going on. But then by the end of the 2 weeks, I'd made the adjustments. So at the start of it, I looked like I shouldn't have been a black belt in those classes. But by the end of it, totally fine. So there's an adjustment period. And if it doesn't resolve itself within that period, and you're a purple belt and you're getting monstered by like baby blue belts, then there might be something there there's probably something there that needs to be addressed. But like at the end of the day, there are requirements like for the belts that we're talking about. I said we've just white to blue belt, predominantly fundamentals, and this purple belt focus is really, if we to recap on those, it starts to shift from just being individual techniques to a more conceptual understanding of jiu-jitsu. It starts to become much more personalized, both in your game and your training. So we should be able to see what your A game is. So for me, people knew I was about triangles. Like, you're a triangle guy as well, actually, at purple belt.
Yeah, it was.
And you should definitely be dangerous. So you should be given the other senior guys a really hard time if you're on your game and they're off it. Particularly like brown and blacks, you should be getting them on the run if they're having a bad day and you're feeling good. The other thing we mentioned as well is that the gap between your best and worst days should really be starting to shrink quite a bit. And then there'll be some other things that would shift in the terms of the focus of what techniques you should be developing. Part of that being probably footlocks if you're particularly into. Well, actually, it doesn't matter whether you gi or no gi.
Footlock specifically, the leg game, because I mean, footlock should well and truly be developed by them. But yeah, that's the game. Did you mention taking ownership of your game?
Yeah. So, well, sorry, I touched on that in terms of it becomes more personalized. So you start to drive your own training more as well. And I think that's a pretty good summary of how you should be thinking about your training when you're trying to get to purple belt, and what it should be when you're at purple belt as well.
I think the other thing to remember, because there's always a danger of imparting the wrong impression, because purple belts, like we said, they're very good, they're serious, they should be dangerous. It doesn't mean the purple belts aren't going to get tapped by the good blue belt here and there and that kind of stuff. I mean, we've both got two glaring examples, one at Tomo and one at Abbotsford. Blue belts who catch everyone. When they're having a good day, man, they catch me, they can catch you, they can catch a lot. And that doesn't mean that if you're a purple belt and every now and then every major gym has a star or has a couple of blue belts who are just killers. They're young and they're training every day. Just because that guy's catching you from time to time doesn't make you less of a purple belt. I mean, that's the reality of jiu-jitsu. It's not so simple.
It's not black and white. It's not that purple belts never get caught by blue belts. It's just the ratio. Exactly. So the purple belt catches the blue belt 7 times, and the blue belt might catch the purple belt 3 times, or whatever the number is.
A lot of those absolute phenoms.
Yeah, exactly. But I think we nailed it. I think we did all right. Considering zero preparation.
What's that?
What are you laughing at, Muzz?
I didn't know we would sign. I was just wondering if that was the sign off. If we're still live, we're telling everyone that we nailed it, or what?
No, we're telling everyone that we nailed it. You got to claim one every now and again.
I thought it went okay. And I guess the other thing is, not everyone's going to agree. Different gyms have different ideas and different standards, and that's okay.
Yeah.
One of the beauties, for me, of jiu-jitsu is, and one of the most important things of jiu-jitsu, and I don't care what people who disagree think, because I think it's fact, is competition. Competition is what has driven jiu-jitsu to the levels that it's at now, 100%. If there was no jiu-jitsu competition, we'd all be doing hoist Gracie front kicks and headlock escapes still, and there wouldn't be much progress. And so at the end of the day, whether people do or don't agree or have different points of view on what a purple belt is or whatever, well, we meet on the mats at competitions, and that is an objective tool that gets to sort it out to a degree. And that's a beautiful thing. There's no running, there's no hiding. Every time, a dominance purple belt goes out there, we say, hey, this is where we think this purple belt's at. This is what we think a purple belt is. And they might win, they might lose, but it's there for the community to judge. So whether you disagree or not, or you have a different path, or you take a different route there, I guess you could say we'll meet you on the mat, and that's that.
Yeah, competition is a very, very good litmus test for the level that you got at your gym. It doesn't, not everyone needs to be competing in your gym, but it definitely helps if you've got a handful of guys, because they keep the whole level really honest.
And they're not all going to be killers, of course. Plenty of people compete on killers, but you need them to be roughly thereabouts, and that's a good indication.
All right, dudes, awesome.
Sweet.
Again, claiming it. I think we killed it, given the context.
% left of my battery, killing it.
Yeah, we did it.
Yeah, well done.
Catch up with you guys as well. Let guys know
likewise.
Know what's going on with all the gyms. But yeah, so guys, if you have anything that you want to know about what we just talked about, obviously you can hit us up, send through any questions, whatever it might be, and if there's anything that you want to address now that we're going to try to get back onto this thing a little bit more regularly, then let us know what you want to talk about or hear about. But until then, see you on the mat.
Peace. Out.
And we won't have to cry.